Welcome to CarePod, a safe place to educate, inspire, and renew the caregiver. Listen in with our host, Dr. Kiplee Bell, as she interviews different experts along the caregiving journey.
So, such an important time in this current climate where we need direction. We need to come together as a community, regardless of walk of life, faith, perspective. And I'm so thankful to have this next guest with me, Reverend Christine Davis, with me, spiritual director, hospital chaplain, the one who comes to bedside to provide clarity to families. And it's important work. So I'm really excited to have you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on. It's such an honor to be featured as a guest.
Absolutely. So tell me your why, how you began this journey.
Yeah, it's not something that a lot of people know about, especially the term chaplain. Most people associate it with the military and don't necessarily know what is it beyond that. And it is a type of ministry, and we are part of the hospital team of caring for patients, for families, and for staff. I began my work really because I was a patient myself. I grew up in the church and was very into all things youth group and bell choir and very much involved. But I thought that I was going to go into medicine and help heal people that way. And it wasn't until I became a patient myself. I was in and out of hospitals, including a hospital where I later worked as the director of spiritual care, and ultimately was found to have generalized epilepsy. But it took so long to get to that diagnosis. And I found myself dismayed with some of the bedside manner of the professionals who were caring for me. And it was around that same time that the church I was attending had a new pastor who reached out to me and just talked to me about how I was coping with this diagnosis, how it was impacting me, not only physically, but also emotionally and spiritually as well. And looking back, I now see, that was spiritual care. I was getting to be the recipient of someone giving me spiritual care. And so that's now what I do for patients. Hospitalizations can bring up so many layers of emotions and, spiritual complexities. Even if I am visiting someone in the hospital who is there for something very routine, and it was a planned procedure, they may not have been to the hospital since they were saying goodbye to a loved one, and that comes rushing back for them. Or maybe people just have an abundance of time to kind of think about their mortality in new and different ways. And so that's really what I find joy in doing, is helping people to connect with what's going on for themselves.
So amazing. I want to circle back to your point about the delay in diagnosis, because that is a thing, right? There are often times where the presentation may not be as apparent and it takes time, and that can be harrowing in itself, discouraging in itself. So what have you taken from that specific experience to encourage those who may come out of the hospital environment just with an unknown?
Mm-hmm. Well, and you know this well, right?
Yeah.
Being a physician, I have learned to talk to my patients and to let them know that they know their bodies better than anyone else. And so if they think that something is wrong, there is likely something wrong. And, healthcare pays my bills. And there are still lots of issues with the medical system and the ways in which people's real symptoms can be dismissed, particularly women of color. And I think that is something where we have to help people to advocate for themselves or for their loved ones that are going through something. So really encouraging people to pay attention to what their bodies might be telling them. I read a quote somewhere once that said, we want to listen to the whisper of the body before it starts screaming. And there's such spiritual combinations when it comes to looking at embodiment from a holistic perspective.
Absolutely. I often say God drops you a pebble and then a brick.
Oh,
You
I
know,
love that.
I often
Mhm.
say that to patients. So,
Mhm.
take the pebble, evaluate your current lifestyle, make some modifications, baby steps, etc.
Mhm.
So important. So, my curiosity is around transcending care. So,
Mhm.
for instance, we're taught, not to transfer our own personal background or belief systems onto the
Mhm.
patient. And I have to say, admittedly, so I have broken that rule multiple times over my career as a Christian, as someone who loves the Lord, someone who allows faith to guide their work, someone who's emotionally driven. I find myself grabbing the hands of the family, praying with them if they ask me to, etc. How, what is that line, or how do you guide care with interfaith or multi-faith, interfaith families, multi-faith belief systems, etc., while at bedside? And of course, walking into a family that you may not know, their particular belief system.
Yeah, it's a great question. And you are not alone. I train chaplain interns and they all come in with the same, question of how do I do this? Or I was just lecturing to some medical students the other day and they're like, oh, we don't know what to do with this. You're telling us that we're spiritual care generalists and yet we don't feel resourced enough to be able to do this, or we're afraid of putting our own biases out there. Uh, I think the biggest way to start is where your patients or your families that you're caring for are. Meet the patient where they are. When I am with a patient, I'll go into the room and I may say, I'm the chaplain, and sometimes that elicits all sorts of responses from people. They say, "Oh, I'm not very religious." I say, "That's okay. I am not the church police. I want to find out what gives them meaning." What helps them to connect to themselves, to others around them, or to the world at large? That is my very simple definition of spirituality. And it's going to look different for different people. Some people it is, oh, I'm all about Jesus. I want to talk to you about Jesus. I'm like, all right, we could talk about Jesus. Others, it's being in nature. And when they're in the hospital, they're not able to access, that nature. And so their connection to their own spirituality is cut off. For many people, what comes up for them is family, and that is their primary or ultimate concern, as theologian Paul Tillich would say. So it's about starting where they are and then going out from there. And sometimes people have a lot of spiritual or theological based questions that they might be asking. And something that I have learned is they don't necessarily want those questions answered. So, for example, why is the biggest question I get from my patients in the hospital. Why is this
Yeah.
happening to me? And
Yeah.
that, yes, you've heard this, right? And the temptation is to answer that question, to give a beautiful sermon about theodicy and why terrible things happen. And my interns do that all the time. But actually, what is more powerful is allowing them the opportunity to ask the question. Why is really an expression of pain, of lament. And sometimes as an outsider, as someone who, doesn't know them, isn't their regular clergy person, they can ask that question to me because I'm not going to judge them. I've heard a lot of people say, well, if this might be, me doubting my faith, or this might be me being angry at God. And if I told the priest that, they would think it would be sacrilegious. So giving people the space to talk about, all of the emotions that are coming up, and all of the ways we call it spiritual distress is happening in their lives, that alone is healing. If I were to give them an answer, it would shut off all of that, beautiful dialogue that could happen.
Absolutely. So you spoke about being in the bell choir, those early seeds. Did that come from a specific elder in your family? Or do you remember as a child just being drawn to spiritual life?
Yeah, so my parents went to the local Presbyterian church, but I definitely took to it more than anyone else in my family. And so to me, that is an element of the fact that we all engage in our spirituality or our religion in different ways. My sisters, they've not been to a church since my ordination, and even then, they hadn't been to a church for years prior to that. Even though we all had the same upbringing, so it is really about identifying. And for your listeners too, some of them may find that sense of connection within a faith tradition or an institution, or they may find it elsewhere or some combination thereof. So for me, it was, I sometimes, if I'm talking to more Christian audiences, I will say, that is the work of the Holy Spirit because for me personally, because I don't know how else to really describe the way in which I took to it. And then I work with people that are coming from all different avenues, or sometimes there's a lot of trauma that's involved in their early upbringing as it relates
Yeah.
to religion, and having to deconstruct that
Yeah. And
is a process.
the mischaracterization of who God is
Mhm.
often turns people off as well. So, yeah, so important.
Imagine a career where your passion for caregiving opens doors to a global future. A career where your skills not only change lives but also unlock international opportunities. Introducing the first global station of the impactful caregiving brand, now in partnership with Partners in Home Care Service. We are revolutionizing caregiver training with world-class courses that guarantee a U.S. visa and job placement. Earn prestigious certifications from the U.S. American Heart Association Training to Train the Trainer, TESDA, and U.S. Certified geriatric certifications, and additional CME for licensed prescribers. Our hybrid training model offers both remote and live, in-person sessions, complemented by quarterly webinars and topic-specific workshops. Think of the savings you'll achieve by investing in your future instead of costly traditional services. Our program channels your resources into top-notch training, ensuring you're fully prepared to deliver exceptional care while securing a rewarding career abroad. Join the movement. Transform your career. Become a part of a global standard in caregiving excellence. Visit impactfulcaregiving.com or partnersinhomecareservice.com to learn more and enroll today. Your future in caregiving starts now.
Tell me now, post COVID, the narratives of our medical system being broken, you yourself acknowledging not the best bedside care in your own personal experience that kind of led you to hospitalist chaplain work. What's the bomb for us all? It,
Mm.
how do we restore the culture of caring?
I think so much of it is related to the first question you asked me. What is your why? And helping people, whether or not they're working in a hospital or wherever they are doing professional caregiving, helping them to get back in touch with that why can be very powerful. We refer to it as that meaning making, and for some people, it's making meaning of their suffering as well is so important. And I think caring for ourselves individually, even if we are in institutions or systems that are not caring for us collectively, really maintaining our own sense of grounding and being in whatever way that can look like. I often will talk about spiritual self care or soul care because self care, as you know, we talk about it in terms of, spa days and bubble baths, and those are lovely. and I'm down for those. But it's not what it looks like every day on an ongoing basis to really, as we said before, pay attention to those pebbles or to the body's whispers. How do we proactively make sure that we are setting boundaries so we're not depleted in our caregiving? How do we find things that bring us joy in the face of suffering? And that's one I try to preach regularly to people that are working in the hospital. We are exposed to an inordinate amount of suffering, and we have to counterbalance that with more joy so that we are not getting jaded or burned out or having that compassion fatigue that is rampant right now, especially in healthcare.
Absolutely. So what is your offering to the systems? I often say, I don't want a pizza party. I don't want a
Yep.
pizza party. I want to be able to connect with my colleagues on a level that, again,
Mhm.
restores interpersonal communication and,
Mhm.
basic common courtesy,
Mhm.
compassion. I oftentimes have a debate about whether or not you can teach someone to care, right?
Mm.
Because we are in
Mhm.
this kind of quick jiffy care type mentality in our systems, the rush to get people
Mhm.
out, to turn the beds, and patients are
Mhm.
feeling that. Patients and
Yes.
families are feeling that. So what's your offering to systems in terms
Mhm.
of what are the steps that systems can take to help restore and heal their caring communities?
Mhm. Uh, yeah, so just yesterday, I was on the hospital well-being committee meeting because we are looking at this. How do we provide well-being for our employees? Part of the problem, I think, is that it looks different for everyone in terms of what they're wanting, right? Some people want that pizza party, not me, but I'm with you. But some people, that is meaningful recognition. Others want to, have the thank a doctor day, which, we do that as well. And some people that is sustainable. Others, it's about, are we being paid a fair wage? Is our staffing situation such that, this is sustainable? Others, it's being able to come to work and talk to their colleagues and have the time to connect with them. One of my favorite formal things that I do in my hospital, and plenty of hospitals do this. Have you heard of Schwartz rounds before? Um,
No.
so it's a great program, and it started out of Mass General, and it started because it was a patient who was also a healthcare attorney who was dying, and in his final months said, "You all have cared for me so well, the nurses and the physicians and everyone in the hospital." So he wanted to create something for them, and he said to them, "What do you want?" And they said, "We want a place to talk about what it's like to care give." And so these are a
Wow.
nationally recognized care rounds program. And what it is we have a panel of people from our hospital. So it's a different panel every time. We're trying to be interdisciplinary in nature. Sometimes it's a physician, a nurse, security guard, medical interpreter, social worker, EVS worker, or environmental services worker. So we try to bring people together and then have a topic. The last topic that we did, I think, was the patient I'll never forget, and talk about what it is like to care for people in this particular way. And then we open it up to a larger panel discussion. And people say, I feel less alone, or I can't usually go home and talk about everything that I'm seeing. And this is a space where we can talk about it. So that's one formal project that I recommend to people to engage in if they're not already and they're working in a hospital.
Love that. I love that. And to feel seen,
Hmm.
because oftentimes ancillary staff doesn't feel seen. So I love that interdisciplinary approach between the security guard, janitorial, because these are the people that are picking up on cues that are relevant, especially in non-hospital environments, assisted livings, independent
Hmm.
livings, where they may pick up on behaviors that may not well be identified early on or early enough to the clinical staff. So important, so important.
Hmm.
So tell us about your work in terms of your remote offerings, your in-person events, etc. How does one intern with you? Do you accept interns that are not on the path to becoming hospital chaplains, but more so that enjoy the work or want to understand more of this work at bedside?
Yep. So if someone wants to intern with me, they do have to be in New Jersey. We do in-person internships, but we will often have people who are working elsewhere in the hospital and want to learn more about themselves, because so much of the work is self-reflection, and we work a lot with countertransference and psychodynamic steps to how to be a better listener. And if you are not in New Jersey or not willing to try on a new career, the best way, get in touch with me or to read read some of my writings is I do have a Substack where I write twice a month long form articles. I feature stories from my work in the hospital, as well as spiritual practices that people might try. And so I have a number of articles that people can read retroactively, but you can also find all of that on my website, which is christinevdavies.com. And then I do have a private practice where I meet with individuals for spiritual direction, which is a little bit of a different offer, but essentially meeting to talk about what is going on with your spirituality and how you might unpack some of the trauma that you might be carrying, as we've referred to earlier, from growing up in a toxic religious environment, or if you're looking to connect more fully with God or the transcendent or the divine, we try on practices for that as well.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. So give me your final words or of encouragement for our CarePod audience.
So I would encourage your listeners to make sure that they are caring for themselves in whatever way that looks like. That is going to make them even more effective when they are caring for others. And so even if it is taking a moment to take a deep breath in and to connect with themselves and their reason for doing the work that they are doing.
So important, so important. I applaud you for this work. I thank you for this important work. I often lean on just even the chapel environment, frankly. When I feel tight, I go into the chapel, and it's very cool to see all of the different faiths represented and to sit alongside people of different faiths than myself and pray and be still. So it's important. It's important. And I thank you so much for your time.
I'm so glad you utilize that space. It can be, so sacred and a pause from the busyness of someone's day.
Absolutely. Multiple times. Multiple times. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on and having this conversation.
Yeah.
Great information right from the source. For more information on how to caregive like a boss, check out impactfulcaregiving.com. Want to be a guest on the show? Contact us at CarePod at impactfulcaregiving.com.